Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone?
So how many days?
Oh gosh, we're just 2 days away from Salah.
Okay,
just
good.
2 days away from
2
Salah.
days away.
Just 4 days away.
Fattening
from...
up our RAM.
Yes, yes we have. Yes we are. Yes we are. Alrighty. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, the Dutch government has collapsed after the far-right leader, Geert Wilders, pulled his party out of the ruling coalition in a row over immigration and asylum policy. Now, the Prime Minister, Dick Schoof, has handed in his resignation and that of his 11th-month-old cabinet to King Wilhelm Alexander. Remaining ministers will stay on in a caretaker capacity until new elections will be held, which will most likely be in October. Now, Wilders, whose populist anti-Islam Freedom Party finished as the largest in parliament in the last election, he did say that he would fight the coming elections to make the PVV even stronger and with the aim of becoming Prime Minister next time. Now, the far-right leader had said earlier on Tuesday that all his party's ministers would quit the government after the other three partners in the four-party coalition had rejected his radical proposals on immigration. Now, the proposals were a 10-point plan aimed at radically reducing immigration and asylum, which included enlisting the army to secure and patrol the borders of the country, turning all asylum seekers back at the border, and closing refugee accommodation facilities. So very, very strong words there. Now, Lee Jae-Myung has become South Korea's president at the third attempt after defeating his conservative rival Kim Moon-so. Now, a swift transfer of power means that he's already taken office, already been inaugurated, and that's happened today. He's 61 years old, and he did grow up as a child laborer, also as a factory worker before going to school, and he inherits a very deeply scarred South Korea. He faces the task of restoring stability after his predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol's disastrous attempt to impose martial law in December. He'll also be expected to move quickly to address domestic issues that have largely been sidelined while South Korea confronted its biggest political crisis in decades, which is, of course, looking at income inequality, the soaring cost of living, and how to resurrect dialogue with an increasingly erratic North Korea. That being said, Lee campaigned behind protective screens. He did wear bulletproof vests, and he was always surrounded by armed guards throughout the campaign process. And that's after threats to his life back in January, as well as a knife attack in which he sustained some neck injuries. Now, that did require emergency surgery. Now, aside from the physical attacks that Lee has overcome, he also has legal cases that could plunge his presidency into crisis before it barely, takes feet. So he's accused of making false statements during a televised debate during his last presidential campaign in 2022. So we'll have to see what his presidency will look like. Those are your stories. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
So apart from that, there are also financial scandals as regards, Lee and like bribery scandals and so, but all of that was waived because of immunity. I mean, once he's president, he's going to have immunity, but it's going to be a strong opposition point against him. What are some of his policies? He wants to sort of like rejig the economy, pragmatic, fiscal discipline for the economy. Also, he wants to bring about AI and all of that, more to the economy, to be able to upskill the economy, upskill workers' rights and things like that. There are many other things too he's also planning to do, as regards immigration. He's been seen as anti-feminist in some instances, but at some point he had pivoted. Very controversial figure he is. So it's not going to be an easy passage for him. Sometimes he tries to, lean to the moderate right part of, South Korea, which is highly very polarized politically, and especially after all of this brouhaha, with the last president and the state of emergency declared. The vote really is not a vote for him and his policies. It's a vote against anything that looked like the former president. Pretty much that was the order of the day, and that's why he got in. How he's going to be able to navigate through all of this, only time will tell. His views on North Korea, he believes in engagement gradually to be able to get to the level of denuclearization. That might also be hard. He's also pushed some Trumpist card in the past. So these are some of the challenges he might have to face as he navigates. In Holland, the truth has to be said, there's a wave of right-wing nationalism. Proud to, because I remember when they were doing the coalition agreements, I was even surprised that Schoof came out on top because I thought Geert Wilders was primarily going to be the prime minister. And I'm not surprised that the coalition failed. what I predict might probably happen is that there's going to be a consolidation of Geert Wilders' party in the parliament, and it will be the beginning of that right-wing nationalist government in the Netherlands. Yeah. The Netherlands that historically has the historical antecedents of being very liberal. The Netherlands that legalized the red light district. The Netherlands that had a museum, for marijuana and all sorts. That's the Netherlands for you. But with people like Geert Wilders. Geert Wilders had been charged many times for inciting hatred. I mean, there was a case around 2016 around that. Yes. This Geert Wilders was known to be the man that compared, the holy book to Mein Kampf. So that's the kind of acerbic rhetoric he brings. And I'm very scared for the Netherlands, just like also what is happening in Poland. There's this resurgence of right-wing nationalism, especially among young, disgruntled men in these societies. We must be able to look for a seminal moment to, try to push back and try to restructure the dynamics of society, because it's an intense one coming up. I predict maybe when they finally have the elections in October, he might consolidate.
All right. Well, to South Korea, where his inauguration speech focused on the fact that the current state of global trade is an existential crisis for South Korea. And South Korea is one of those countries that we always celebrate because of how they were able to focus inwards and build their economy. Under Park Chung-hee, and their motto was export or die. Now, just to put things in context, in 1962, Samsung was a company that manufactured noodles. And we see how far Samsung has come now. And so I bring this into context because this man has a tall order stacked up against him, because they've gradually seen a decline in growth over the past few years. Now, that was largely related to the fact that there are low fertility rates, the population is a little bit older, and of course the rest of the world is also catching up with regards to industrializing. Now, they anchored a big part of that economy on steel and aluminium. What has just happened in the past 24 hours? Donald Trump has increased the tariffs on steel and aluminium to 50%. So this is coming at a time where the United States is one of South Korea's biggest trade partners. So it truly is an existential threat for them. And while all the tariff brouhaha was going on and the rest of the world was trying to figure out how to navigate and manage it, they had this deep political crisis that they were trying to resolve. So they haven't even begun to scratch the surface on how they will react with this export-dependent economy of theirs. What will their response be to keep jobs that are already in the decline, to try and tame inflation that's already running off, and to try and, it's going to be up to them to see how they're going to boost fertility. That sounds like an internal problem. But, a number of issues. I don't really envy this new president at all, because he's inheriting, this is one president we can say is genuinely inheriting a lot of problems, not those who always blame the past administration. He really has a lot stacked up against him, and I wish him all the best, because he's also dealing with North Korea. In the process of that, relations with North Korea have also just declined so sharply over the past few years. So we'll keep tabs on him and see how he performs.
Okay, the Netherlands. The Netherlands has a 150-member parliament. And as it happened in the last general elections, December 2023, no party could win outright majority. In fact, it was the PVV, the party of Geert Wilders, who has left, that won 23%. So he was the majority member of that party. The other members of the coalition, right-wing coalition, the VVV, the National Centrist Party, yes, and also the Farmers Movement Party, they didn't support Geert Wilders' far-right, ultranationalist position. He was saying that asylum centers should be abolished, applications should be stopped, the military should be put on Dutch borders, and in any case, keep the migrants out. He said that he got involved in politics to become prime minister. So at that level, there is personal ambition, not to oversee the destruction of the Netherlands. And the moment that he pulled out himself and his ministers out of that coalition, of course, being the majority, the coalition was bound to collapse. And it was on the basis of that that the prime minister himself decided to resign. So there's some kind of imbalance, some kind of crisis. The only option is to keep a caretaker committee in place to host the NATO summit that comes up in about 3 weeks. After the NATO summit, the other option is to have an election. However, the other pressure that they have in the Netherlands is that in the recent presidential election, it was a far-right nationalist that won that election. So, not just in the Netherlands, also in the whole of Europe, there's been a rise of ultra-wing anti-immigration sentiment, just the same kind of thing that you have in the United States. So immigration, either in Germany or in the Netherlands or in Poland or Italy,
yes.
There's this anti-immigration, keep outsiders at the rise of isolationism, protectionism, what you can even call provincialism from Europe to the United States. Whether that is good for global peace or not is another issue. Now, the second thing, South Korea. Now, what has happened in South Korea is a protest by the people against the ruling party, the PPP. You recall that it was under the PPP that we had that crisis in South Korea last year when President Yoon Suk-yeol,
yes.
Decided to declare a martial law. And that led to issues, protests, constitutional court within, and all of that. And now an election 6 months later about to be conducted. Naturally, the opposition party, the Democrat Party, which holds the majority in parliament, won with this, their candidate, President Lee, as he now is, but Lee is a very controversial figure, human rights lawyer, 61 years old. He even had a case in the Supreme Court, which had to be kept on hold to allow him to take part in the election. And that election has taken place. He's president.
Yes.
He has constitutional immunity. But he faces a number of challenges. And he seems to realize that himself.
Yes.
When he spoke to the National Assembly yesterday, he said his task is to promote unity because he's becoming president at a time when South Korea is so heavily divided internally. And he said, whether you voted for me or not, I will be the president of all the people of South Korea. And I think that message about unity
yes.
is very important. Second thing that he talked about is that he's going to review commercial law, put in place immediately, which he says it will be activated immediately, an emergency economic reform body to look at the economy. And on the basis of that sentiment, South Korea stocks went up 2% by this morning. The KOSPI and the small cap KOSDAQ, they appreciated by about 2%. Now, also, the South Korea won also strengthened against the dollar to the tune of about 1.37, 1.86. So there is a positive feeling. The other thing that President Lee will have to worry about will have to be geopolitical issues. One, U.S.-Korea relations, particularly in the face of President Trump's tariffs. Rebalancing regional relationships with China, which is also a major issue. And then its closest neighbor, North Korea.
Correct.
So these are the three major issues that are on the table for him. I don't think his trial will continue, yes. But I think that the young people, the elderly people who voted for him, they voted against the ruling party, the PPP. They wanted democracy to win because President Yoon, before him, almost derailed South Korean democracy.
He did. All righty. Well, thank you all. Let's move on to newspapers. So we have some time for a quick chat off the back of that. Let's start with This Day. This Day does lead this morning with news that the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Olufemi Oluyede, has temporarily relocated to Makurdi, which is the Benue state capital, due to the killings that we are seeing of innocent villagers by herders and militia groups. That's, of course, as members of a new terrorist group, Mahmouda, have reportedly killed 3 villages in Duruma village, which is actually in Kwara State, raising fears about a new security threat. That's also the lead story on the front page of the Daily Sun this morning. Meanwhile, the New Telegraph reports that civil servants under the Federal Workers Forum have appealed to the federal government to pay outstanding arrears, including wage awards and promotion allowances. In a letter addressed to the President, President Tinubu, and copied to the Senate President and Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Forum urged the urgent action to address long-standing issues affecting federal workers. The New Telegraph's picture headline, though, does show President Tinubu conferring the national honor of Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic on billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates, who is, of course, co-founder of Microsoft and the chairman of the Bill Gates Foundation. And on the theme of commendation, The Guardian's headline quotes data released by NOI polls for April 2025, which says that there has been a notable, albeit gradual, rise in the percentage of Nigerians who approve of President Tinubu's job performance. This comes after a period of considerable public dissatisfaction, particularly concerning economic hardship and the impact of the fuel subsidy removal. To the leadership newspaper now, which has the APC dispelling reports that the National Assembly members would be granted automatic tickets to the 2027 election are fake. We do have APC National Publicity Secretary Felix Morka on the show later on this morning. We do look forward to hearing what he has to say. Finally, The Punch has issued a flood warning as NEMA deploys teams in 15 high-risk areas.
I want to talk about the story about the floods and NEMA deployment. I was shell-shocked today, and it's a reflection of incompetence across board, not only in this government, successive governments, that the Mokwa floods now that have killed over 200 people and they're still looking for body, over 1,000 people missing, was caused by what? Poor drainage. Minister Utsef was saying that today. It's in the papers. So what can we do? How can we put efforts in place now to fix the drainage system effectively? I think these are the questions we should ask, because you see, the problem with Nigeria is people die from disasters that can easily be avoided. You remember the Alu Dam situation? Money had been disbursed for that dam, no accountability. It's after the dam caused chaos now, they're saying they are disbursing 80 billion. Hope this 80 billion will be spent with a lot of accountability. Now we're having a case of poor drainage.
And in addition to that as well, we still have people who insist on building in areas that are flood prone in gullies, because there was a report that also said that a lot of these people were living in gully areas. And I know the optics are difficult and painful when we see the various states going around and demolishing people's homes that are built in the wrong places. So it's double pronged, right? The first side of it is the fact that we need to also learn to do our thorough due diligence before buying land, building on land, and so forth. Secondly, on the government side, the corruption within the local governments when it comes to acquisition of land and when it comes to all those processes also needs to be addressed, because some people genuinely do believe that the land that they're building on is genuine land that has the integrity to be built on. So there's a lot of systemic issues that need to be dealt with.
Well, just on local news, I think that, if you look at the front page of this morning, or a story in this day, we're being told that there is a new terrorist group called Mahmuda that was wreaking havoc in Kwara State. We're told that in Niger State, the Joint Task Force was able to demobilize, neutralize about 30 bandits in the state. We were told that in Imo State, a gentleman, US-based Nigerian who was visiting, was killed somewhere close to Owerri, Imo State, and his wife was also abducted. Now, that story graphically puts in your face the seriousness of the security situation in the country, and in the face of also the Chief of Army Staff moving from the Northeast to the Middle Belt, Benue State. It just shows that, look, government has a major task to make this environment secure for everyone who lives in this environment. Whether you are Nigerian or you are a Zimbabwe born.
Nigerian by Nigerian by other means, thank you. So whoever, we just have to be secure in this environment. So why we praise the military for, giving us good optics, doing something in Niger State, the Chief of Army Staff being proactive and leading from the front. This problem is a problem that has to be addressed. And that is why I think
stories about some soldiers shooting innocent civilians. I think that's unfortunate. Those people should be deployed to better use for security purposes rather than intimidating civilians. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Adefemi.
Thank
We
you.
did it. We did it. All right.